Hello, Demetrius Gelatis here with Jesse Engel.
Hey,
Jesse,
what's up?
good to have you back. How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Back
All
again
right.
for another one.
What's that?
I said back again for another one.
That's right. Guess who's back? Back again. Well, so I'm looking forward to this. So thank you, Jesse. You've got a couple things on your mind you wanted to talk about. Um, but let's see, as an icebreaker, have you read any pool books, either instructional or entertaining, like entertainment, either way?
I'm trying to think.
Have
You
you
know,
have you read any books? I mean, are you just
yeah, I still learning
just
how to
kidding?
read. So, uh, no, I do remember reading one. This is like I don't even know what the name of it is because it's like it's not a popular one, but I had to do for like some, book report type of project thing, but it was like you needed a specific type of book and for some reason the one that like Jeanette Lee wrote like fit the category for what you could do. So I was like, all right, this is like tolerable. I can at least read this and get through it. And I don't even remember what it was called. It was just kind of like a sort of a story about her, kind of upbringing into pool and her first years on tour or whatever with her experience with the other players and stuff. But I mean, it was probably 15, 18 years ago. So it's a long time. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
So
the only pool book I've actually ever like, you know, done the whole thing with. I did tinker with that like that one pocket book, the big I forgot what the name of that one is either, but I looked at some situations out of there, but yeah, never really read any other pool books.
yeah. Okay. Well, I was just curious. So that's sometimes that's good to know because some people learn things from books and other people look at it and like, if that's not how great players figured it out, of course they go down roads that most of us can't go down, full-time players and stuff. I was just going to mention because I saw a thread on AZ Billiards talking about like, the pool books out there and kind of which ones are the top ones. And I'll tell you what, for anybody that's looking for a good pool book, I'll tell you the two that I recommend are for, I would say, for anybody that's learning the game, Robert Burns' Standard Book of Pool and Billiards is it was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable book. It really I even to this day when I teach pool and I'm doing this stuff, like I'm surprised sometimes by the holes in people's knowledge and especially not the people that are like somewhat new to the game. If people are like, they've only been playing seriously for a year or two, hey, it's a complicated game. I get it. But like people that have been playing a long time, there's just a lot of myths and a lot of misunderstandings. And then when you get a book, the question is, do you want to get a book that's really superficial and doesn't really tell you what's going on and doesn't get deep in anything, or do you want to go to the other extreme and get a book that's so complicated and nuanced and deep that you can't even read it? I think Robert Burns' book is perfect. It gives you the right level of depth of exactly what you need to know in a really casual, lightweight, digested fashion. It's easy to extract all the information, and that's how I learned how to play is out of that book. It really did a lot for me. So I would really recommend if somebody's looking for a good pool book, Robert Burns' Standard Book of Pool and Billiards. I also really enjoyed Mastering Pool by George Fells, and then of course the Inner Game of Tennis for the mental game. So anyway, I just wanted to plug book recommendations. Did you have anything other than just like watching players and you know playing better players? I mean, anything that you could throw in the hat for
Yeah, I
guidance?
mean, obviously I kind of grew up in the YouTube generation, right? So th that's kind of where I learned 90% of pool. I mean, I was putting everything into practice all the time, but I watched so many pool matches at night that I learned pretty quickly that the correct ways to play patterns, with rotation specifically. So everything just kind of it seemed like it came naturally, but maybe I was just consuming so much content that I was learning, more than I even realized at the time. I mean, when you're coming up, it's like your learning curve is just so insane. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was just all YouTube, man. And then obviously watching and playing a few other better players in the area, but
Yeah, you're
there's
welcome. No, I'm
no,
just kidding.
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
yeah.
Hey,
No,
man,
I
I had
definitely
that.
learned something from you.
There
Yeah,
was like a 3 year window where I could beat you. I gotta go back and every night I go back and relive 2005, Jesse. I'll tell you,
yeah,
that was the year.
yeah. I mean, honestly, like when I started to take the game pretty seriously, it was like you and I mean, Bo still lived here at the time. I'm trying to think if we had really anybody else that played like levels beyond me where I really pick stuff up. I don't really know, but I think it was probably just you guys. And then obviously we started kind of playing and
Oh,
traveling a
yeah.
little bit together. So yeah.
Bo Run again. He's mentioning Bo Run again, currently in LA, and he's actually coming out of the retirement to play represent his city in some like LA versus some other city battle.
Oh,
Did you hear
really?
that? Yeah. So he's picking
I
up the
didn't know
pool
about it.
cues. Anyway, okay, we'll move on. But no, that's cool. YouTube, yeah, watch lots of top players. And one thing too. So now's the part where I plug my boot camp. 3 days, one-on-one intense training, guys. It's awesome. I don't know what to say. Like I'll tell you, um, MN Pool Bootcamp, Minnesota Pool Bootcamp. It's mnpoolbootcamp.com. Check out my website, but really just contact me if you're interested. Um, I am pretty well booked for the year. I could probably squeeze one person in December if they were really hungry, but and then January I play a few tournaments. But so I'm my next availables are going to be kind of like end of January and February. And so it's not too soon if you want to make 2025 the year you come out here. It's not too soon to start talking about it. And I wouldn't talk about this every month, and I wouldn't do this if I wasn't a I I hate snake oil. I hate garbage. I hate I any if I wasn't like 100% convinced that this is what I need to be doing and that this is making a difference for people, I would just go back to work and make more money at a corporation. But like I work with people, I see what happens, and I'm like, oh my God, yes, I have to keep doing this. This is like, there's no way this person ever would have learned to play this way. I just actually did this yesterday. I did a review of a set from a student that I worked with a year ago, last September. And I watched their set against the Ghost. They played and recorded it and sent it to me. And I reviewed it. I I'm just telling you, I couldn't believe it was 1 year. I'm like, this was it 2 years ago he trained with me. I was looking up the dates. I had to go back on my calendar and find out when we trained together. I'm like, it seems impossible. His stroke looked so good. His routines looked so good. The way he was moving the cue ball, the way he was playing angles, the way he was getting shape, it was so sophisticated and so smooth. And I was like, I just, I was shocked because the player I worked with a year ago, he'd only been playing seriously for less than a year or something when I worked with him. I just, anyway, so obviously this guy's put in a lot of work. Obviously he's been doing a lot of things on his own. But I see this and I'm like, yep, I have to keep teaching. And for anybody that's like, yeah, what can you really learn in 3 days? And really, is it worth? It's like, if you want to learn to play pool, come to Minnesota. I'll teach you. But okay, um, so there's my plug, mnpoolbootcamp.com. Get on my calendar for 2025. Let's go. But okay, and one thing that I've probably mentioned before that comes up is that people don't really learn all the ways to spin the ball, and people don't really know how to apply extreme side spin and pocket balls. So just one thing that I've been asking my students lately, I've just been taking an informal poll. I've been asking people, have you ever tried stopping the cue ball with side spin and seeing how long you can get it to spin in place? Jesse, have you ever tried doing that thing
I
where you
have done that. Yeah, I remember when I was younger, again, one of the YouTube videos I was watching, it wasn't Florian that was doing it, but somebody else like it was something about like some world record. I think there was another video of like Larry Neville that did it at one point
of
too, and he had like
course
15 seconds, and I was just like, how does the guy like have the ball spinning that much? But it's pretty hard to do. I mean, to get I mean, a lot of it's relying on the cloth and the balls as well. But yeah, it's just not a shot you'd shoot, but it's pretty tough to do and get it really spinning for a while.
Although I've thought about it, Jesse, okay, picture this. Hill, you're on some stream table, right? And it's hill, and you've got like some, half court 9 ball straight down the corner pocket. And you get down there and just crank it. It was a powerful stop shot. And the cue ball's just spinning like a top, and you go shake the guy's hand. And everybody's like, what was that? Would that not be the coolest way to win a tournament?
I mean, the only thing I can think would be cooler is if you had the control to do it, where you have like your 9 balls like hanging in the jaws, and you're able to do it, just kind of like replace the cue ball with it. Now it's been there for that'd be pretty fun. But
Yeah, yeah. I did one with little Chris one time. I like to do this sometimes. Of course, we are just playing for fun, but it was on a stream, and I had the 8 ball in the corner. It was straight in, and I shot the 8 ball in. It was probably like on the spot. It was like 2, 3 feet away from the corner, and I shot and I followed the cue ball where it rolled right up and it got to the edge of the jaws and hung. And I was like, anyway, little. Got to us. We always for people that don't know, when Jesse and I get on a table, we play and we play hard and everything, but then like we just like to tinker and try stuff, and it's always fun. So speaking of tinkering, you've tried to stop in your cue ball. I just timed myself because now it was I did one take, and I was with a student, and I just wanted to see because I was like, why are we not getting enough side spin? And I wanted to see what I'm like, just see how long you can spin your ball because that kind of tells you like, how far out there are you getting with accuracy. And I shot, and I actually had a stopwatch, so I shot, and then I hit start on my stopwatch, and it was over 19 seconds from when I actually reached over and hit start. So I think it was about 20 seconds. And that was first try. And it's like my conditions are not terrible, but they're not like I don't have like spray all over the ball. I'm sure that like if I went to a billiard table with like heated slate and all the polished balls and everything, like
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm going to get a world record, but the point is, we both tried that. I figured you would have tried that at some point, and a lot of the people I've talked to have never tried it. And so you could sit there and say, well, why would you ever try that? But like I don't know. I think I just mentioned like we're both tinkerers. We both like to see how stuff works and what you can make the balls do. And isn't it cool to find out like, yeah, you might not want to ever use this crazy shot. But then the funny part about these crazy shots is you learn these crazy shots and you learn stuff about how the balls work and you learn techniques. And then even if you wouldn't do that extreme thing in a normal case, stuff comes up where all those things come up. Um, I was playing Dave the other day and I had two shots back to back that I haven't shot in a game. One I haven't shot in a game for years, and the other one I've literally never used in a game before. It just came up, and I was able to hit it. And the first one was the one with like a masse where you're slightly on the wrong side of the ball and you need to go the other way. So
Oh
you like
yeah.
spear it in and like masse the ball the opposite direction. I mean, how often does that really come? I haven't used that since that tournament we went to. I went to some anyway. It's been 5 years since I've used that in a game. And then the very next shot, I got like this far away from the ball. It was like a centimeter or less from the ball, and I was straight in for the corner and I didn't want to double hit it. And so I used the shot that I'm sure I learned this from Bull Runnigan, where you put your hand on the table as a blocker and you put
Yeah,
your
make sure
tip
you
right
don't
up
follow
against the
through.
cue ball, and then you shoot really hard and it hurts your hand, but your blocker hand only goes forward. Anyway, I just smashed it in the corner perfect. And it was just funny to have like two shots back to back that I almost
That's
never
pretty
use.
cool.
And I ended up running out. So, okay, so what's the point? I know I'm geared up. I'm talking a lot, but guys, tinker, first of all, tinker, tinker, tinker. Play. It's a game. Play and learn what the balls can do. And in particular, see how long you can spin your ball. Because if you can start spinning your ball, not just a little, but a lot, that you might not ever shoot a stop shot where you spin in place for 20 seconds, but the ability to generate that type of spin does come up in a game quite often. And so once you learn what's possible, I can teach you what to do with it, but you can figure it out on your own if you play if you tinker.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's also, I mean, it's just better to have, to maximize your capability for all types of English and then, figure out how to control it afterwards is kind of the way I look at it. I feel like a lot of players as they're learning, as they learn to draw and follow and add a little side spin, everybody probably because their stroke really isn't developed yet and maybe their accuracy with the tip accuracy, they miscue a lot when they move out to the outside of the cue ball or top and bottom, right? So then they develop this like inherent like uh, sort of like scarcity, right, with it, or you're a little bit scared to kind of move closer, or I mean, sorry, further away from the center. That's just what I've seen with a lot of players. I mean, I had it when I was growing up too, and then probably just because I was doing so many repetitions, I just sort of overcame it pretty quickly. But I feel like that's yeah, that's so your advice is good for that reason too. So
Yeah, and one thing that I think is a really good one. I know I'm not the only person. I've heard other people talk about it, but I figured this out on my own when I was like 14. I would set up a shot that's not easy, but it's not that difficult, just like a routine shot. And then I would set it up and I would try it with every spin, high center, high right, straight low. And I would just try to figure out what are all the different ways you can play this shot. And my goal would be, yeah, some of them might be uncomfortable, but I wanted to, I mean, back then I was a kid. So my mentality was I want to be able to make any shot with any spin and any speed. I mean, is that too much to ask? And granted, I can't make any shot with any spin and any speed. However, in that process of swinging for that ideal, I can make a lot of interesting shots with a lot of crazy spins at different ways I know some ways to play the cue ball that most people don't like, you know what I mean? And so
yeah.
that's kind of a form of tinkering. Did you ever do something like that where you play one shot with just to see what the maximums and minimums are from all the different positions or
You know, it wasn't like tons of like standard shots. It was more so like the tougher shots to see like what the maximum I could get out of them was. Like the one that comes to mind, I think you remember this is Do you remember the shot at the bar table championships against the Mark Hang?
Is
That
that the
like
one where
Jerry
you're
Duff
frozen
one?
on the rail? And
Yeah, yeah. So I played around with those types of shots a lot because a lot of times you have that shot where you have to like, and it's hard to
yeah,
explain that to people now.
he's basically, it's like if you have a shot where you're shooting an object ball down the side rail and you're cutting it in and you're trying to use maximum low outside to like max low outside, bring the ball back up table, bring the cue ball back up table. Jesse was shooting that, but instead of shooting it from like the middle of the table where you can cue it, he's shooting it from on the opposite side of the table, from frozen on the side rail on the other side of the table, where you have to elevate, like very elevated, and spear the ball hard enough that it doesn't massay on the way over there. And so basically it's like a Corey Duel type shot where you're very elevated using low outside from off the side rail across table. And yeah, you've showed me how to do that on a tight 9 foot table at CRs. I've worked on it a little bit. I've surprised I don't know that I like the shot, but I've surprised myself that I can even do it at all. Like I would have thought that I couldn't even
Yeah,
do that. And you opened my eyes on what's possible. And then you hit it on, it wasn't hill, but you were on the hill and you came with that. You kicked in a ball and got that shot, and then came with that shot to run out the game. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and
So I
I got
mean,
half.
little right, yeah. So like little shots like that. I mean, those are the ones that I usually mess with more. A lot of kick shots as well. I spent a lot of time with, when I was kind of younger. I guess a little bit
Cool.
more hungry to learn, but yeah.
Yeah, so tinkering around, lots of different shots, and tinkering around with side spin. Okay. So okay, I just wanted to kind of encourage people to tinker because I think that's going to be good for your game. And then we're going to get into our main topic, which is going to be interesting. It's going to have to do with goals and also with kind of self talk and stories that we tell ourselves. And they kind of overlap. They really overlap a lot. But I wanted to throw you a softball, Jesse. So let me ask you, tournament prep. If you're playing a tournament, what do you do? When does your prep begin? What does that look like? Like, does it begin a month, a week, a day? How soon do you start kind of amping up for a tournament? Do you do anything differently to prepare for a tournament? And then what do you do on tournament day, before the match, and even like when you're warming up at the table? Is there anything that you like to warm up? Like, how do you prep?
Sure. So this is an interesting one with the tournament prep, like prior to tournament day for me, because, you know, so many years I just played so much pool that I don't really think I ever developed an actual routine with that. I just was always kind of in stroke because I was playing all the time. So
It would be
nowadays,
like if I it would be like if I asked you, Jesse, how do you prep to breathe? You'd be like,
yeah,
well, what are you talking about? I just
yeah, I
breathe
have
in and
no
out like I
clue.
do that all the time. Yeah.
But nowadays, I mean, for the most part, unless I'm like overly swamped with personal life or work or something, right? I mean, I just try to hit balls a few days, like the week of the tournament. So I might put in a couple hours here, nothing too crazy. And then I would say the day of, it's less for me about like hitting balls. It's more so about like getting the body ready. So, not like overdoing it on if there's any sort of like no, like not overdoing caffeine, right? Like not eating the wrong foods where my stomach's going to be upset. There's yeah, yeah. There's like tons of things you can I actually haven't had caffeine in like 3.5 weeks now.
Oh my
But
goodness.
yeah, I know it was rough for the first few days, but the body feels a little bit better, so that's good. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just in general, you gotta like obviously everybody's body is a little bit different. Everybody has a little bit different prep that they're gonna have to do. And then like for me, the mental focus part, I feel like if you're spending a lot of time like close, I'm talking like within like an hour or so of the tournament actually starting or your match starting, for me, like I don't really like to be like ultra social and kind of, joking around and doing a bunch of stuff because I feel like that just kind of throws my brain off a little bit. It uses up a lot of unnecessary energy. That might sound a little silly, but it's easier for me to just stay calm and just kind of, breathe and I don't know, maybe scroll on the phone or just kind of listen to something and I don't know. That's what I like to do. That's where I've had my best success, where I can just kind of get into like a Zen focus mode almost, and then just keep to myself throughout the tournament.
Very cool. Okay. Okay. So you hit balls a few days ahead of time. You'll just try to hit a few extra balls, make sure that your body is, rested and non-caffeinated. And then
Yeah.
when you go to the tournament, you just kind of try to like start quieting your mind, withdrawing into your own self, getting kind of meditative where you're not chasing your thoughts and your brain kind of starts getting focused. And then what about when you get to the table? It's like, they call your match, you just it's a 11 a.m. match. It's your first match of the day. You got 5, 10 minutes to hit balls. Is there anything, do you do the same thing every time or do you just throw balls around and hit them?
Yeah, not the same thing every time. I mean, for instance, like with let's say with like bar table, that's we play a lot of those tournaments, so or used to at least. I probably like I because the break's so important, like I usually try to at least hit like one or two racks and see how the balls are actually racking so I can get a good maybe a little bit of an edge there. Aside from that, just kind of like slowly and like diligently like running the balls out correctly, not trying to make sure I can hit as many balls before the match starts, but more so just even if I only hit 5 or 6 balls to get a good feel of like how the rails are playing, the speed that the ball's coming off the rail, and obviously the speed that the bed of the table's playing too. Those are the really only things I need to see. I mean, I've hit every other shot thousands of times, so I'm not gonna like make some drastic change last minute, just to give myself the best chance to I don't know, I guess estimate the speeds of stuff moving forward. And then the last thing I would say is I I feel like when you first start a tournament, it's easy, at least for me, to kind of forget that every shot is extremely important, right? Even the simple ones. So you break, you got a wide open table, even if it's like one of those racks where you just know like you can't screw this up at all because there's three balls hanging in the rack, right? Or in the pocket, right? I still feel like it's really important to go through the process every shot mentally, knowing that, all right, I'm here. This is the best shot. I got to walk around the table, figure out where I need to be, go through your whatever your pre-shot routine is, kind of not like speed up too much, make sure your tempo of everything's good, and like think through every shot as if it's like an extremely difficult rack because you need to get through that rack or whatever, like the same way you're going to have to get through the tougher parts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually think it makes a ton of sense because I think that if you had three salads in the eight ball and they're all fairly open and you get ball in hand, play an eight ball, of course. If you're just hitting balls on your home table for fun, your thought process might be something like three open balls in the eight ball, they're all open, shoot them in. And and the problem is that when you start playing and all of a sudden you're under pressure and you're nervous and your stroke feels a little disconnected, your body, your heart's racing and you feel uncomfortable, and maybe you're down 2-0 and this is your first reasonable chance, funny things happen. And all of a sudden, like we've all had this happen where and everybody knows like a lot of times people have this happen where they'll even solve the rack. They'll break and they'll make a breakout and they'll deal with that tough shot. And then they end up with these three open balls in the eighth that looks like under any other conditions would be like, why are you even making me shoot these? And all of a sudden you kind of weak stroke a ball because you're nervous and you're kind of feeling like, what if I miss it? So then you make it, but it wobbles in and you hit it thick and weak stroke it. And then you end up funny angle on your next shot. And all of a sudden it's hard to get on this ball. And then how is this run getting this tough? And why is my game not working? And then all of a sudden things spiral out of control. And so the point is that what might be a thoughtless, careless, what you can get away with being thoughtless and careless on your practice table because you're not under as much pressure and you forget about the times it doesn't work. But when you're in a tournament, you get one shot. It's better to start like you have to be a little bit. You have to be more thoughtful than you normally. I mean, I shouldn't say you have to be more thoughtful than you normally are because you should always be that thoughtful. But I think when people go to tournaments, maybe they get hitting them pretty good at home where they're just running out pretty casually, and then they think maybe this is the tournament where I just show up and all the balls just kind of go in for me. It's like no, no, no. It's going to be work. Let's prepare to put in that kind of work.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
about?
And I mean,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's always like you can always find a case that doesn't, seem to work with that, right? Like you could find some top players that seem to just kind of get up there and freewheel every time. But I don't know. I mean, we can only go by our own experiences, right? And just for me, I've had my best experiences doing that when I've felt like I just kind of ran through tournaments and dominated. I just felt like I had full control the entire time. The only thing I could get in my way is like a random kissing on the break or something, like everything just felt super controlled because of that. So,
Well, and even the top players, like we said, I mean, if they're playing full time and they're in competition every single week, the fact is that they're just always in that gear. They just don't even leave that gear, and they don't have to go to work at a job on Monday, get yelled at by their boss, have some urgent deadline, have to work late because they have to catch up on some spreadsheet, and then run over to pick up their kids and watch some kind of marching band thing, and then next thing you know they're like didn't even get time to practice, and then they don't even touch their pool cue for 5 days. And next thing you know, they show up at a tournament like, how do I play again? Like the top players, they do this every day, and so they're just almost. In some ways, they're a great example of what to do. In other ways, they're a terrible example because we can't duplicate that type of life, and so you have to find. That's what I hopefully some of the things that you and I can bring to this as a podcast is like what what can an average person do in a life? What's the closest we can come to following the path of the top players
Yeah.
without actually just chasing the dream, Um,
Hmm.
so my question was going to be, what about, are there any mistakes you see people make? Like what warnings would you give somebody, like what not to do prepping for a tournament or warming up for a match? Is there anything you see other people do? You're like, why are they doing that?
Hmm. Yeah, I'd have to think that one through a little bit. Nothing really nothing pops out, I guess. I mean, aside from the obvious, like you probably shouldn't be taking shots at the bar, minutes before your match or doing something silly like that. But um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think like the things that I would view as mistakes are probably just people being too social, using too much energy. Like, but that's just because I viewed it, the complete opposite way. I think that you should like preserve as much energy as you can and just try to stay as focused as you can on like what your mission is for that day and not let as many distractions come in. So to me, that one seems like a large one, but yeah, I can't really think of anything else off the top of my head here.
So I think that I'll share my answer on these, and it won't be long because we have a lot of overlap. But yeah, when possible, a few days before the match, there's two things I like to do. When possible, I like to spar and hit sets with other people that are very good players, because you know. For me, if you're playing sets where you're flipping coins and then playing against somebody that's sitting you in their chair and beating you, a lot of people, it's funny. I know some people that really don't like to play tough players before a big tournament because they don't want to lose and have their confidence hurt. But I think a lot of players, including myself, feel the opposite, which is it's play the best players you can. And if you lose, it's just going to get you toughened up and like ready for the adversity of that tournament. And once you lose a few big sets, I know a guy that liked to lose. He'd like to play really tough players, and he actually sometimes almost like he self sabotage and put so much pressure on himself before the tournament that he would just get beat before the tournament just to kind of like got to be the underdog coming in and just put himself in the right state of mind. So I think playing tough players and sparring before the tournament's something I like to do. And then the day of, oh, another thing I like to do is I like to watch some pool matches, just to kind of watch a pool match and just really don't be surfing my phone and don't be, but like picturing myself at the table, thinking about what I'd be thinking about in the spot, the pressures I'd be feeling, not just like passively watching, like, oh, what are they going to do? He's going to shoot this ball here, but like really visualizing myself in that spot and going through the emotions of that player and just breathing and thinking about how I'm going to handle that. I'd say the day of, an hour before the tournament, that's kind of what I'm doing too. I like to think a little bit about like what's going to be the hardest thing that's going to come up here. What are the parts? What's going to be the biggest adversity that's going to come up physically, mentally? How difficult? I blow it up in my mind and like this is going to be very hard. I'm going to face this. I'm going to face this. It's going to be very tough. It's going to be very scary. It's going to be very demanding. It's going to be very overwhelming. And then I kind of gear myself up to go face that. And then I think about what it would feel like if it doesn't work and if I can't do it. And I'm like, okay, all right. And then I try to go in and so it's I guess it's visualization, but it's a visualization of like almost like you visualize worst case scenario. And a lot of people think this is really negative, but it's not. A lot of great players do this kind of thing because and anyway, so and we can talk about that or not, but then finally when I get to the table, um, yeah, I don't really have any set thing where it's not like I'm going to kick to the end rail and find out how the table rolls or anything like that. I pretty much do what you do. I just hit a few balls, get really connected, fight over the details. So I think we have a lot in common there. And I would say the most common mistake I see is people trying to like panicky make last minute changes to their game. I would say you can work on your game at other times, but once you're a week away from the tournament, you're not going to try to get better. Now you're just trying to optimize what you already have and bring what you already have to battle, because changing your game around or trying new things is it's just going to sabotage your confidence and could distract you and create too many variables right now. You don't want to forget about getting better. It's time to take the broken pieces you have and throw them at the wall and see if you can get it done.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, um, and so yeah, I'll just mention that, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So, one thing I thought, and I can't remember always what I've already talked about on the podcast, but there's a question of what can go wrong. What can go wrong? And I never thought about this because to me it's so ingrained that I've been doing this all my life, and my whole pool game is kind of built about this. And so I'm surprised that not everybody does this. When you look at a pool table and you're trying to figure out what the pattern is, all of our strategies, I'm going to try to play this ball and get on this ball, and I'm going to try to come with the line on that shot. I'm going to accept some distance over here and try to, all of those strategies are answers. And the two questions that it's answering are, what could go wrong that prevents me from running these balls out? And what could I do to avoid that? What could go wrong? How do I avoid that? What could go wrong? How do I avoid that? And as I watch players play, I've run into players that really don't ask those questions. They just don't ask what could go wrong. And they just kind of get up there and like just think about what they hope would happen and then hope it works. And they never take the time to say, well, if I was going to fail to run these balls, how would it not work? And what can I do to try to avoid that? Do you know what I'm talking about? What are
I
your
do, yeah. I
what is
mean,
this? What are your thoughts? Where do you go from here? Because I've got some things to say, but I don't want to rant too long. So you go
sure.
ahead.
Well, I know that I do that on like literally every shot, you know. A lot of
Yeah.
it's kind of like an autopilot, but when you're in some situations where you can clearly see, I mean, this, you know, this could go wrong. Same with though with your approaching just the entire pattern of the table, right? You kind of think multiple shots ahead. That's the whole point of it. So you can figure out, all right, if I do this, this, and this, you know, what's the likelihood that I'm going to do that or run into problems versus, you know, the other options. So, I mean, I think, yeah, that's like to me, I don't want to say it seems obvious, but it like in a sense it does. Like it seems like it should be obvious to everyone that that should be a part of your thought process. You know, whether you're really good at it or not, you should be thinking about, all right, what is the worst case scenario? Or like how could this possibly go wrong? Otherwise, how do you even have a plan to begin with, you know?
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
you
don't
know what
feel
I've
bad if you're not thinking about it that way, but you
yeah.
know,
So I there's a four ball run I set up sometimes when I'm first clocking a student's game, and the 7-9 are on one end of the table, and the 6-8 are on the other end of the table. And I put the 8 ball hanging in the jaws of an up table. And so basically, if they shoot the 6, 7, 8, 9 in rotation, they've got the 6, and then they got to come up table for the 7. And then the 8 is deep in the jaws on the other end of the table, and the 9's on the middle of the opposite end rail, and it's really hard to get from the 8 to the 9. So when I give them ball in hand and tell them you're playing 9 ball, what do? The right play is to shoot the 6-8 combination, because now you tap in the 6, and then the 7 sitting up there in front of the pocket, the 9's on the end rail right by the 7. Like it's just almost undoggable. Like you could run out like 20 times in a row if you know how to play. But if you don't run it out that way, if you shoot the 6 and then the 7 and then try to deal with the 8 that's deep in the jaws of table, that 9's on the middle of the opposite end rail. I'm not going to get out all the time. If I get really good on that 8 close to it, I'm going to get out most of the time. But if I end up with a funny angle and some distance, like, I mean, that's a tough
yeah,
shot. You know what I
it
mean?
is
You're not
tricky.
always going
Yeah.
to get out. And you're like, I mean, I might be a favorite, but I'm not prohibitive favorite. And so what I do is I hand people the cue ball. And anybody that gets up and just sees that the 6, 7, 8, 9 are all open and they're all sitting in front, the 6 and the 7, they got ball in hand of the 6, and the 7, 8 are sitting in front of pockets. They just get up and shoot the 6 in and start running. Like all of a sudden, like I'm just like, okay, it just tells me a little something about what I have to do with this player,
Yeah.
because it kind of reveals a lack of sophistication with thought process, which is totally fine. That's why they come train with me. I'm like, I'm gonna open your eyes.
Yeah.
So that is my litmus test for if people are asking that question. So I this is kind of like I guess you could say it's my calling now, it's my living, is For people that don't ask that question, why not? I've thought a lot about this. So why would people not ask the question of what could go wrong and how can I prevent it? I'm putting you on the
That's
spot.
okay. No, no. I would like my first guess would just be that part of it's they just don't really understand what can go wrong. They don't really understand the different ways that that either that the pattern can go wrong because of lack of experience or knowledge, and same with shot to shot. So for a lot of people, it's like how do you like it's so much work to think about that because you really don't know what you don't know. It's like the one like quick, analogy I could think of is like I remember when I first started to learn anything about one pocket on like every shot to me seemed like impossible because I was like, is this even the right like am I even supposed to shoot at this ball? Or am I supposed to duck here? Like what is the right shot? So everything was like seemed impossible and made my brain hurt. So maybe that's kind of what they're feeling.
You know what they
But
say, Jesse, is experience is learning something you needed to know just after you needed to know it.
that's pretty
That's
good.
so, but no, so you're right on. So you're saying that they just don't, yeah, so they don't even know what could go wrong. So they can't even answer that question. I was going to say there's another one that's closely related, which is they might not have confidence that they can find a solution. So it's almost like, well, yeah, I know it could go wrong, but I don't know that I can do it. I don't know. It's just that's how pool is sometimes things go wrong and there's nothing you can do about it. What are you going to do? And so if you don't have the tools and strategies to solve those problems, then why even bother asking what could go wrong if there's nothing you can do about it anyway? It's like it would be like if I'm kicking at my 8 ball and I'm trying to call the 8 in the side and I'm kicking to the head rail trying to make some Hail Mary kick shot on the 8. Well, it's like, am I going to bother asking where's the cue ball going to go if I kick it in? Is there a danger of a scratch? It's like, well, what am I going to do anyway? It's like I got to kick at it. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
maybe that's how people feel all the time. It's like, well, what are you going to do about it? So either they don't know they don't know the risks or they don't know how to solve the risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And then I thought about it a little bit, and a couple other ideas. Like I think some people might not want to play that way. And so one person that I worked with really liked this example as a if you're running a business or if you're managing your personal finances, anything where you're kind of dealing with a budget, you have your income and then you have your expenses. It's a lot more fun to focus on making more money than it is to focus on managing your subscriptions and watching your expenditures. Like it's like which sounds more fun. Like if the goal is to get more money in your budget, which sounds more fun? Finding a side hustle to make an extra 1,000 a month, or sitting down and looking at where you spend your money and which restaurants you go to and where you're leaking. It's like that sounds miserable. That sounds like it's tied to like you know self denial and some kind of whereas like making more money sounds fun. So I think when
Yeah.
it comes to pool, I think people want to focus on like they don't really they want to like just shoot straighter and make more shots and feel better and run the table over. That's the fun part. And the whole like what could go wrong and what if I it's just they don't really like to play that whole management game so much. Um, and then finally, I hit you with this one too. Is I think that what was the last thing I was going to say? Oh, I think some people think it's really pessimistic. Like, why would you want to think about what could go wrong? What your brain, what you think about is going to be what happens. Your brain, it doesn't know the difference between don't miss and miss. It just hears miss and then it misses. So if you think about what could go wrong, you're just thinking about the wrong things. You need to be thinking about what you want to do. What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, I think it'd be hard to change that for somebody who is just extremely pessimistic. But the way that I would respond to that, at least out of my own perspective, would be it's still important to ask yourself what can go wrong because you need to like weigh the options, figure out the percentages, but then also at the very end of that, make peace with the fact that something can go wrong, but you're confident that the way you're shooting this ball or the way you're going to go about running the table is like with your knowledge the best way possible. And then if it does go wrong, that like sure you can kind of beat yourself up later on or whatever, but that's a whole other topic of dealing with failure. But that's the way I view it. Is like at least then you're okay with the fact that all right, I knew I shot the right shot. I gave it my best in that moment. Yes, it went wrong, but at least I went through that process rather than like that to me that feels better, and that's like something you can like hold your head high over. Aside from like the idea of, you get down on like a pretty easy routine shot, and then you just kind of see it's like when you have those shots where you're playing eight ball, and on the eight ball you're kind of like on the tangent line, like the cue ball is going towards two balls, and you don't even go over there to look like, is there a window there for it to go through and scratch, and then you like have that funny like slow roll scratch through the balls. You're like, well, all you had to do was look, but you know so at least if you looked and you made peace with
Which
it, then
I had one. It still burns me, Jesse. This was from 15 years ago. I was hill with a guy, and I had to cut my object ball. I had to cut the eight in the corner, and the cue ball was going to go two rails at another corner, but it was blocked by two stripes. And and so I checked to see if there was a gap in between those stripes. The hell of it was I actually slightly hooked myself on the eight. I couldn't cut the eight enough to cut it in without curving a little. So I was really handcuffed as far as speed and the way I played my cue ball. Like I had to like just bend the cue ball just a little to twist it in and curve around to get this eight ball. So it's hill. I've got a slight swerve shot, and I looked to see it was going two rails, and these two balls, there wasn't a path between them. There was less. You couldn't shoot a cue ball between them. There was less than a ball gap. So I got down and I shot and I swerved around and I cut the eight in, and the cue ball went two rails, and it was going right between them, and it double caromed off both balls, tick tick, and it's like both balls moved like 3 inches, and the cue ball went double caromed off and went right in the pocket.
oh
I was
no.
just heartbroken. It still hurts.
That's
But at
all I
least I
was thinking
checked.
about was the Jason Klatt shot. You remember that
Oh
one?
yeah. Oh man,
Uh,
yeah.
Good
Okay,
fun.
so Jason Klatt, he scratched on a routine nine ball that was like it was like perplexing because he's a hell of a player, and this scratch is like it's almost like watching a player. If somebody were to follow a ball into a pocket at a high level, you'd be like very perplexed. It was on par with that.
Yeah. It's just
So
a
things can go wrong. So here's my answer. So I read a book once, and I'll even cite the book, even though I'm slightly embarrassed. It was written by, I think her name is Carolyn Kepcher, and she was the one that I back on the back when Donald Trump was on The Apprentice. The
okay.
first couple seasons, he had like these two people that would be like his whatever. And I watched like the seasons of The Apprentice. Anyway, Carolyn Kepcher wrote a book, and I'm like, all right, I'll check out her book. You got me. This was during like my sales, personal improvement, and whatever. And so I read her book, and the only thing I remember from the entire book, there's only one thing I could remember from the book, and it was cool though. She said there's three mindsets that people have. There's pessimists and there's optimists, but there's two different kinds of optimists. Cautious optimists, and I don't remember her names for them. I'm calling them cautious optimists and kind of Pollyanna like delusional optimists. So here's the way this works: a pessimist, when they're evaluating whether something can be done, they start off and they just list all the reasons why it can't be done. And then they say, yeah, it can't be done. A delusional optimist looks at the same problem. They say, oh, yeah, this could be done easy, no problem. But the cautious optimist, people confuse them for a pessimist because they start off and they sound a lot like the pessimist. And they say, boy, there's a lot of things that could go wrong with this. And they start just like the pessimist. They list all the things that could go wrong. But then they don't conclude it can't be done. They just say, these are the things that we're going to have to manage and deal with to make sure it can work. So I think it can work as long as we deal with all those problems. And if you look at it, the pessimists don't do very well, but the delusional optimists don't do very well either because they run into problems that they didn't have a plan for. It's actually
Mhm.
the cautious optimist that's kind of got the right mindset as far as it can be done only if we identify and plan for all the places that it could break down. So when we're playing pool, it's not negative to say what could go wrong, this and this and this and this. Okay, based on that information, what can I do to minimize my chances of those things happening? Great. I'm sure it can be done if I legislate to avoid these things. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Makes a ton of sense.
So I thought you'd pick it up. I would say I was cautiously optimistic that you'd be on that page with me.
Yeah, yeah. That's
You know,
funny.
I
No, I
caught
think
that.
that that's the yeah, I mean that seems like the best approach in my eyes, but
So it's not negative, guys. To just yeah, happy medium. It's all about balance. So
fair enough.
okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to you because you've had something on your mind. And Jesse, what's been on your mind?
Well, yeah, you can probably help me kind of put together what the actual topic would be. But essentially, it's what you had brought up earlier about like the stories you tell yourself sort of leads into like the self-fulfilling prophecy, uh, just all all to do with like the mindset that you have with, when you're going into battle, if we call it, right? Any kind of tournament, any type of match, whatever it is. Like,
I appreciate you calling it a battle. Sometimes I hear people saying they're going to play a game, and I look at them like, dude, what do you mean? Are you not trying to like tear that person's heart out with while it's still beating and then nothing? Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
uh, no, it's good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Art of War. This is
So,
like, yeah,
yeah. So, I mean, you and I have talked about this so many times in different ways on our hours upon hours on the road, right? But so I don't really know where the best place to start would be. But
Can you give an
I
example? Just an example of what you're talking about. It doesn't have to be anything special, but just so that people listening are like, what do you mean by stories or mindsets?
sure. So, for instance, like there's two examples. So, like you're getting ready to play a tournament, and leading up to that tournament, in your mind, like you believe that you are like supposed to not just with the results, like, but you believe you're supposed to win. You believe that you are like a great pool player. Like good things are supposed to happen. You kind of just feel like you're white magic. Like I don't know, like things still do go wrong at the same rate probably, but you don't feel that and you don't think that. You're just so I guess you could say part of you might be like a delusional optimist in a way, but no, you know what I mean? Like it's like a confidence thing, right? And then the other side of that is like you're not really playing any different, but you just you tell yourself a different story. Like, yeah, I'm not playing good enough to deserve this right now, or I just don't have like I just can't focus. All these different things, that there's different mindsets with it, right? Sorry, the dog's gonna go crazy here. But yeah, so that
That's me. I've been blowing a dog whistle. I wanted to see if it came through the Zoom.
that's why.
I'm like trolling your dog while we're doing this.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's been pretty chill, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if that's the best way to
So
explain it. You
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
you're
So
always good at
so so basically, I'm trying to make sure I'm picking up what you're laying down too. So yeah, why like if you feel like, for example, if you've been having a bad week and you've been playing a little rough, and then you go to a tournament and you're like, man, I haven't been on my game and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to play well, and I'm not really sure that I just feel like bad stuff is going to happen to me today. And if it comes down to hill, it's like I just don't know if it's going to work today. That type of so you're telling yourself a story that it's almost like you're programming yourself, you're programming your own performance, and then when you get opportunities, you're kind of telling your brain what you expect it to do. And if you're telling your brain that you expect it to malfunction, then that can be tough, right? So, and of course, then the first question, and now we're kind of hijacking because now I'm getting into the details, but like somebody might ask then, well, if you're having a bad week though, it's equally foolhardy to like play make believe and be like, I'm just going to tell myself I'm hitting them great. I'm hitting them great. I'm a winner. I'm a winner. It's like, well, if you've got a flat tire, you're not going to drive better if you just pretend your tire's not flat. So one interesting question would be, what would you do? Any advice before we get into the big topic? Like any advice for somebody that's been having a rough week on the table coming into a tournament? Like what kind of self story is neither delusional nor pessimistic?
that's a tough one. I was just thinking of the in with the positive, out with the negative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did I tell you that or
Yeah, you told me about the meditation thing. I think
this?
you told me about it I think you tried to be like semi-serious, but it turned into a troll when we were at a tournament once. You were like you were like,
Well,
what you gotta
because
do is I need you to put your phone down, or you started doing it, you burst out laughing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's some tape you
There was a
listened to,
guy I
right?
knew that went to like an AA program, and it was funny because it's like congratulations for his better life. I'm sincere about that, but it was kind of funny because he was just so drink the Kool Aid, and at one point he would always do that like in with the positive, out with the negative. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was
Yeah, I
just
don't
kind of.
know.
It was just, hey man, but like if it saved the guy's life, I'm not making fun of it. It's just,
Right.
it's
No,
funny.
yeah.
That's all. I guess I am a little bit, a little bit.
But just in a friendly way. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't really know what like because it just seems like it sounds like it's a quick fix almost, right? Or you're trying to do something like put a band-aid on something. So I don't really think it's that easy. I think by the time you're kind of getting close and really approaching the moment that you got to deal with it, you're either prepared or you're not. That's what it comes down to. So it's less about like, oh, I'm in a if you get to that place and you're kind of feeling a little negative, panicky, whatever it is, then if anything, you should just, you know, make peace with the fact that all right, you probably aren't prepared correctly. And like we like the previous topic, like you now have to make peace with the fact that things might go wrong, but just try to like work through it the best you can. It's much easier said than done, but it just tells you that all right, my prep work needs some work too.
Yeah, yeah. Real quick on that, I wanted to mention. So first of all, you're absolutely right. Like, there's no strategy to where you're suddenly going to always be playing your best and always come through in the clutch. Like, that's anybody that was waiting for that magic answer. I guess again, you're going to probably dog it, and that's nothing you can do about it. So anyway, but seriously, there's like Jesse said, a champion. Sometimes they play their best, sometimes they play their worst. Good players a lot of times find ways to win even when they're not playing their best. And it's not just about whose best game is the best. It's also about who grinds out the most matches when they're not feeling the best. Who's when they're a little bit off their game, but they're still willing to like instead of punishing themselves by losing and then beating themselves up, they're willing to like win a little on their off day, or they still feel like even instead of telling themselves I don't deserve it, whatever, they're like, no, everybody plays some patchy sets, and that my job is not just to play great and win. My job is also to play patchy and find ways to grind out wins because it's the culmination of like I think about it like Yahtzee. I don't know if you ever played Yahtzee where you have like the ones or the twos or the threes. You know, everybody wants to go for their sixes all the time, but you can't get your upper bonus just because you get a bunch of sixes. If you get four sixes and you got 24 for sixes, you still need the fours or the threes or the twos. And it may not be as sexy, but you still need those three twos to get your upper bonus. Otherwise, you're going to end up losing $50 to Todd Scheidler because you didn't get your goddamn upper bonus in 1996. Anyway, uh, man, we
Whoa,
can't.
trauma coming in.
Yeah, yeah, we gambled on everything. Anyway, the point is that the point is that I talk about getting derailed. The point is that the your best game is like your sixes, and your worst game is like going for your ones. Like you may have wanted to roll sixes, but when you roll ones, you still need your ones. Make this your best bad day you've ever had. Make this your best bad day you've ever had. Okay. The other one throwback too, you were mentioning tournament prep, and one thing I forgot to say about tournament prep, I don't always have time to play a bunch of sparring matches before a big event because if the only events I went to, a lot of them are like a week long or 5 days long, and I don't have. It's hard enough for me to get those days. And if I would only play the events where I have 3 or 4 days ahead of that to play practice sets, I would go to one event a year. And so it's like I have to be realistic because I'm not a full time player. So I would rather go to some tournaments and not always be as prepared as I want to be than just wait around for all the lights to turn green and think that I'm going to wait for some dream day where I get to play full time. So I just wanted to mention that I'd rather play more tournaments unprepared than not play. But
Yeah.
but going back, so that's an example of how the stories we tell ourselves can plant seeds and program our behavior. So that was your topic. I just wanted you to give an example. So why was that on your mind? Tell me a little bit about why that's on
Yeah.
your mind.
So, before this like leaves my mind, there one other example that I think is an important one to point out is one that I know that everybody can relate to, which is when okay, like we all can clearly see which players are superior, like skill set wise, and inferior, right? Or whatever term you want to use. So I feel like a lot of their results are based on that because they've already told themselves the story of what's supposed to happen based on what they, perceive their person's skill set or you know what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, so
I
so
think
I
that
I play a player who's rated 60 Fargo points higher than me. I'm like, oh, this guy, he's supposed to win. I'm a wager underdog. He plays so good. He shoots better than me. I don't know what to do. Well, obviously he's just this is I'm gonna do my best, but he's probably gonna get me. And then all of a sudden you get opportunities in the set you weren't expecting, and you're just not really prepared to capitalize because you had a story about how you're gonna lose. And so you're kind of trying to find a way to follow the script that you gave yourself.
Correct. Yeah. So, and I feel like that one's a little bit more of a disguised one. People don't realize that that's like kind of holding them back because it it's a lot easier to like make peace or or give yourself a break when you lose to better players. When in reality it's like a lot of times when you're playing those better players, you probably had the opportunity where you could have capitalized. But you've just, like I said, you already kind of made peace with the fact that you were going to lose the match no matter what. So once you got to like two or three games, you're like, all right, well, I didn't embarrass myself. I did better than I'm probably supposed to do. So here I am.
This is like what Grady Matthews. I don't know if ever listened to him, the old commentator and one pocket player from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Anyway, he says he always wanted to play a one pool tournament just once in his life where both players would have like a soundproof, view proof, like enclosed booth, and that when it was his turn at the table, he wouldn't even know who his opponent was. And then after he like played a safe or something or missed, he'd just go back into his booth and shut the door, and he just wait until they called him and said, "Grady, it's your turn again." And then he'd go
Yeah.
on. He doesn't even have to know if he's playing Earl. He would have no idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And anyway, it was just a funny thing. It's like he was talking about. It was pretty. R.I.P. Tip of the hat, moment of silence for Grady Matthews. But anyway, the um, the point is that what you're talking about is if you play 10 matches against better players. The question is, suppose you win one of them. The question is, if you didn't know how they played, would you have won more than one out of those sets? How many more sets would you have won if you didn't know who that player was? Would you have won 3 out of 10? Maybe you wouldn't have won five, but would you have won 3 out of 10? And then if that's going on, what's going on with those 2 out of 10 that you maybe would have won had you not mentally psyched yourself out? And then so how many opportunities are we missing because of this? And what can be done about it? Yeah.
Yeah. So to answer that, what can be done about it? I don't know. That's
And I do
that's
think that it affects more people because it's such an obvious thing that I think that what doesn't work. I'll tell you what I think most people do is they deny the problem. They just say, "Well, just play the table." And he puts his pants on one leg at a time too, and I'm just going to play my game and whatever. But they can say that, but if it was that easy, we wouldn't be talking about it. It wouldn't be a thing. So,
right.
and I think that this came up. I did a podcast with Devin Cloud a few months ago about mental game, and we talked. Everybody that talks mental game is unanimously opposed to these little one-liners. So, what was your mentality when you were competing a lot and playing, Johnny Archer and all these guys back, Ralph Souquet, Thorsten Holm, and you're playing all the top players back 15 years ago? What was your mindset?
Yeah, I mean, earlier on it was a lot easier to play those guys because I felt like although I knew I was an underdog, because they were who they were and I was just kind of coming onto the scene or whatever you'd call it. Um, it I didn't have like a delusion. It was just more so like carefree because like it doesn't really matter. Like there's no expectation for myself, so I may as well just like try to steal a few sets off these guys. And I was able to do that, early on because it was easy. But then like once you do that, you kind of build up a expectation for yourself. Like, well, maybe I can and should beat these guys more often than I originally thought. And then that creates like a whole nother battle for yourself inside your head.
It's
So
the difference between confidence and expectation is a very, very funny conversation. I'm not prepared to have A, because that's not our conversation topic, and B, it is one that I find so difficult that I'm not fully satisfied with my own level of understanding. There's some very smooth and subtle. I've given it years and years of thought. By the way, I've got pages and pages and pages of journal entries, and I've read a lot about it, and I'm still dissatisfied with my own level of understanding about the difference between confidence and expectation, because you have to have confidence, but you can't allow expectation to creep in. And we could talk more about it. I have some thoughts about it, but it's an interesting one. But anyway,
sure.
so yeah, to your point, you play him the first time and you're just like, the first time you beat a world champion, you're like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. And then the next time you play him, you're like, okay, now how did I do that last time, and how do I recreate that? It's like totally funny how that works.
It is, yeah. And I think that no matter like how we talk about it, I feel like ego is just always directly correlated with all this, one way or another. It's hard, man. It's hard to keep that thing in check because on one half, like you gotta have the confidence, like you said. You have to have not a level of like delusion, but your self-belief has to be higher because nobody else is going to give you that. You have to have a very high self-belief, but you can't like you just can't kill yourself when things don't go your way either, which is, I
So
mean,
so
I struggle with
let
that
me
now.
share an idea. Let me see what you think of this. So I'll use an analogy. If I told you that, okay, this is perfect. If I told you we got a brand new deck of cards, I showed you it's all 52 cards. We shuffled them up, and I said, okay, here's the deal, Jesse. You're going to go through that deck and you're going to flip over cards one at a time. And every time you pull a king, I'm going to give you $500. So at the end of that deck, what would you expect to profit?
Well, 2000.
Thank you. Just making sure you're with me. All right.
Yeah.
So, and I tell you, did you get to go through the whole deck? So now you're getting ready to flip your first card. Would you be nervous?
Well, obviously not.
Why? Why wouldn't you be scared?
Well,
What if it's not a king, though?
well, obviously I know I'm going to get it.
Okay.
There's
But
no
here's the question. Do you know that that top card is a king?
no, I have zero clue.
What if it's not a king? Wouldn't that be horrible, though?
No. I mean, not at all.
Why? Because you
The
don't care
EV
if
is
that
still the
one's a king.
same. The result's still the same. It doesn't matter.
You know
Like,
that you're going to go through all 52 cards and there's going to be four kings. Now, if I told you that it was an incomplete deck or you only got to flip 20 cards, now when you flip those cards, now your heart's going to be racing like, man, I hope this is a king and I hope the kings are in this part of the deck. So here's my thought on this. And when we compete in pool tournaments, there's different stories we can tell ourselves. So one story is, I'm going to win this tournament today. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I'm a winner. I'm going to prove it. It's today's my day. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to put a win up there and I need to do that. The problem with that, that's not confidence. That's expectation. Because the problem is you might not be able to, because the other guy has something to say about it too. He or she has been training their whole life to put you down. And they might play a great set or some funny things might happen, and heaven forbid you might not play your best. So it might not go that way. So you're lying to yourself. And when your self-talk is a lie, it doesn't work, because as soon as that lie starts to be exposed by reality, I had a person that taught me an awful lot when I was up and coming, and they pointed this out to me. How many players will play really, really, really good, like they're playing perfect pool the first few racks, and then as soon as they make one blunder, then they just spiral, because it's like they tell themselves some story about how they're going to play this awesome set and win, and as long as it's kind of going that way, they're like, yeah, 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 and then as soon as like it starts to like leak, then all of a sudden they like panic and unravel, and maybe it's anyway. When you're lying to yourself, it's a place of fear of exposure. You're afraid of exposure. So a better story, I think, is to treat it like that deck of cards. Because here's two stories that don't work. The first story that doesn't work is the one I just said. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove I'm a winner by winning today, and now's my time, and I'm going to prove it to everybody. But the other story is, man, I never win. I never get it done. I don't have what it takes. These guys are better than me. I know I'm probably not going to be able to get there. So here's a happy medium. What if you said to yourself, someday, someday, my time, it'll be my time. Someday, I'm working hard on my game. I'm getting in the ring. I'm playing. I'm practicing. I'm playing good players. I'm running it again and again. I'm getting better. There will be a day when it's my day and I get there at the finish line. And I don't know if it's today or not, but that day will come and it'll be awesome. And that's what I'm working towards. And it doesn't even matter if it's today or not, because I know that day will come and it's going to be worth all of the stuff I go through. There's no problem, because I know it'll be worth it when I get there. All I've got to do is try to make it today. And if it happens, great. And if today is the day it happens, awesome. And if not, I'll take it when it comes. Because now there's a couple reasons this, I think, is a pretty good mindset. Now we don't have any pressure and expectation on ourselves. We're okay. It might not, because now we're not trying to control something we can't control, which is a way to create a lot of fear and pressure. I have no expectation. My ego's not at stake. I'm like, I don't know if I can win today. But I also know that if I follow this path, there will be a day I win, and that's exciting to me. And so I've got nothing to lose. Today is just the tournament. It's the first card of my 52 cards, and I'm going to keep drawing them. And someday I'm going to get all the kings, and it's going to be awesome. So let's see if worst case scenario, it's not today, and then I'll play again tomorrow. And I can't wait till I get my day. That type of mindset is really hard to beat because you've got the lack of expectation that it takes to be free, but it's also got the excitement and enthusiasm it takes to drive towards what you want. So for me, that's kind of how I try to navigate that balance. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty good analogy there. Yeah. I was just thinking of like if we actually made it like reality though, it'd be like every time you get a king, it's 500, but every time it's a non-king, you pay 500. That seems like more like reality.
Well, I don't think
No, I'm
so.
just
I
kidding.
don't, but
Just kidding.
yeah, if okay, honestly, if you wanted to make it reality, Jesse, every time you play, it's 500, and then every time yeah, exactly. Okay, you got it. So like yeah, you every time it's yeah, you pay 500 a swing, and then once in a while you get your money back. I see what you did there.
Yeah,
Okay,
just kidding.
well played. That's actually pretty funny. But but in terms of like you were making a joke about payoffs, I get it. Took me a
Yeah.
minute to get it actually, but in terms of like the psychic rewards, that's actually how it should feel. And I've used this example with my students before. I'm like, if somebody told you that you have it an hour and you could shoot spot shots for an hour, just set them up and shoot them from the kitchen, spot shots from the kitchen, spot shots from the kitchen, and every time you made a spot shot, you win $10, and you just have an hour of a free roll. It doesn't cost you any money. However many spot shots you make in an hour, $10 a spot shot. Well, if you got up and missed your first two spot shots, would you really care? Like, I'm going to be doing this for an hour. It's all free money. Who cares? Just gobble up as many as you can. Yeah, you're going to miss a bunch. Who cares? That's how you should feel about every tournament you play. Like, the losses mean nothing. Who cares? Let's just only good things can happen. Nothing bad can happen because we don't measure with the tournaments you lose. You measure with the successes you have. So just go gobble up as many as you can. And so then when you play a better player, it's kind of the same way. It's like, hey, I might not get them this time, but there will be a day when I beat a player like this, and it's going to be awesome when that day comes. So may or may not be today, but let's go for it. And someday that'll be awesome.
Yeah. I think one quick side tangent on that, like you said, if you kind of knew that you got to run it so many times, then it wouldn't really affect you, right? I think that's something that's pretty difficult with pool though, for anybody that's like not full time or doesn't live in an area where with wherever they stand with their skill set, they have like tournaments every couple weeks or something. Because for a lot of people, they only get to, fire so many shells a year. So that's the one I mean, I get it. You could look at it over your lifetime. But if you, even just like you and I, it's like look at how many tournaments we both played when we were younger, when we didn't have responsibilities versus like now. That's a huge change, right? So I'm not saying you got to like adapt and learn, but and then realize that you still have a lifetime of tournaments. But it
So
definitely gets tougher. I
there
think
is a there is if somebody had never picked a pool cue before, and they came up to you and said, hey, they worked with you on a project, like, Jesse, I understand you play pool. I've always thought about playing pool. Here's the deal. I can only play, one day a month for like 2-3 hours. Um, I'd like to learn the game, and I'd like to be a tournament winner. At some point, you'd look at it and be like, well, that doesn't get you there. Like, that just doesn't get you there. It's like it would be like walking into a Best Buy or something and saying you want to buy a TV and you've got $10. It's like, well, that's just not like that's not enough. What do you mean? So what I would say then is you kind of have to make sure. And this is not a small detail. This is actually, now that you say it, it's actually something I want to say is very, very important. You have to make sure your goals that you have to be more exciting enough to really motivate you, but they also have to be so achievable that you have total confidence.
that makes sense. Yeah.
And that when you set up a goal, if you set up a goal that's not inspiring to you, then you're not going to be excited about it. It's not going to do anything. But if you set up a goal that you don't truly believe you will achieve, then the problem is, yeah, it's exciting, but it's actually not exciting because you don't really believe it. And so it's not like, why, yeah, it would be cool if that happened, but realistically, I know it's not going to. So it might as well not be a goal. It's not going to inspire you because you don't believe you can do it. And so I think the trick is if you were talking about that person that's playing only one tournament a year and the pressure they might feel. Well, if their goal is to win in tournaments and have, very good tournament results, I would say, well, that goal doesn't match their level of input and their level of at bats. And so
Sure.
it's not a good goal because if they can't look at it and say, yeah, I know, like it doesn't match their input. And so therefore they're going to be in spots where they're going to doubt themselves, like, man, playing one a year, am I really going to be able to do this? And the answer is probably not. And so then if they're trying to do something, now it's like going through that deck of cards and they're like, okay, here's the deal. I want to get those four kings, but I only really can draw four cards. How can I approach this to try to fish out which ones are the kings? It's like, well, you're not going to get four kings with four draws
Yeah.
unless I was going to make a joke about somebody we know that might manage the cards a little bit. But anyway, we won't go there. The point is, if you're playing on the up and up, you're not going to get those four kings. So,
Yeah.
so you have to make sure that the goal is inspiring, but not just achievable. It can't just be achievable. It has to be something in your heart of hearts. You never waver. I mean, you really believe that that day will come, and you can do that. Because anything that's like people talk about stretch goals and very ambitious goals, but if you don't believe you can achieve them, I don't think it's going to fully motivate you, and I don't think it's going to. I think it's going to create more pressure and doubts, and then I don't think it works as well. What do you think?
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know, like I said, I know I'm guilty of that a lot of the times nowadays. Probably expectations are way too high for what I can realistically put in, as far as like effort with prep, any kind of practice, and just the at bats,
So
I just
you've
don't
got
know
the
where
you've
to
got the
go.
triple whammy. You've got not enough at bats, too high of a goal to be believable, but too low of a goal to be inspiring to yourself. so
Pretty
so
much, yeah.
so you're not inspired by it, but it doesn't seem achievable, and you're not giving yourself enough at bats anyway. Yeah, that's. Well, when you look at it, like if you stop looking at it like I don't know, man. Some days I feel it, some days I don't. If we stop looking at our own feelings about this and our own motivation levels as something like mystical that we have no influence over, and we just start looking at it as an equation, which is, are your goals believable, inspiring, and do they match your input? And if the answers are yes, yes, and yes, like you'll probably move. You'll probably move.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
it's a
more of a
pretty good way to put
formula
it.
than a. By the way, that reminds me. I saw this on the AZ Billiards thread. Um, and I was going to say it's more a formula than like some mystical thing. That reminds me of the meme I saw. So here's a little humor break. Two guys are talking, and one person says, "There's only one thing that scares me about Halloween." And the other guy says, "Which is?" And he says, "Exactly." Because witches. Okay, anyway. Okay.
Pretty
All
good.
right. It got me, man. It got me. There's the dad joke of the hour. So this has been on your mind a little bit. Stories that we tell ourselves. We've kind of talked a little bit about the stories about how to handle maybe playing better players, kind of talking a little bit about goals. Where did you want to go? This was your topic, and I'm running you over. Where did
Oh
you
yeah,
want to go with
no.
this?
Well, it was just yeah, like I said, I just thought it was an interesting topic because I feel like everybody's dealt with that so many times, right? I mean, I know both you and I have dealt with that on several occasions. We've had times where more into it and really have a ton of desire, and it just seems like kind of dealing with any adversity or whatever, any like tough matches, it just seems easy. It's not like you don't really think about it because yeah, I mean, you kind of just have a lot of drive and you want to be there. And then like we've probably both felt the opposite. I know I've felt the opposite many times where it's just so easy to be like thrown off and just lose all your desire to want to play. But
So for sure, for sure. So what would you like to share with the audience? Like, what advice do you have for people that are embarked on this pool journey about whether it's about goals, about self-talk, about stories that they have? Like, what would you tell your younger self about this
well, yeah, I mean, what I tell my younger, well,
besides
I think it's
find a
important
game
is
that
like
pays more?
the way that you just summed it up with like with that like equation, that you said. I think that that is an important thing for people to remember, and you should maybe re-listen to that part of the clip multiple times because yeah, if not all of it's there, and if it doesn't make sense, then you're gonna inevitably hit some point of disaster because the the game doesn't like it's not really set up to be we're just gonna like fulfill all your dreams, like I'm not even like saying financially, I'm just saying in general, like you're gonna lose a lot of matches no matter how good you get. You're gonna have like a lot of tough days and tough tournaments or whatever you're playing. So you have to have like a lot of like deeper inner reasoning for wanting to do what you're doing. And I don't know if this is making sense, but you also have to be okay with the fact that like you don't really have a ton of control over a lot of results at the end of the day. I mean, you can do that with skill edge, but you kind of just have to deal with like roll with the punches, as they say. So you have to find like non-result oriented reasons for wanting to play, I think.
So I think you and I have something in common that I think might not be similar with a lot of our listeners, because you and I both started fairly young. And regardless of where we got in our respective journeys, I think when we both started playing pool, we both had dreams of being the best of the world or something like that. Like, I mean, I'll tell you, I won't, I'll admit it. When I was 14, I wanted to be the best pool player that ever lived. Like, that's what I wanted to be. And I'm assuming that, like, talking to you, I kind of feel like you were kind of going
Yeah,
for
of
that
course
same
at
thing.
some point you kind of feel maybe it's not like quite as like I'll be the best to ever live, but you assume that you're like, yeah, I could get to that level and be like one of the best.
So, not one of Jesse. I was gonna. No, I'm just
You were
kidding.
gonna be the best, yeah.
I
That's
was
why I couldn't be the best because I already knew
no.
that you were gonna be the best.
I
So,
mean, you had to make room. So anyway, super funny. So the point is, what? And then, so that was my goal. I was young enough to truly believe, because I was on a trajectory, so here's why. Why would that be believable for somebody like me, who should know better? The answer is, well, I was 14. My game was getting better and better and better and better. I was at the front end of the learning curve where you watch your game like track really, really good. And so you're getting, your high run is doubling every month. It's like you're like, at this rate with the grains of rice on the chessboard, in 64 more days, what's two to the 64th, I'm going to be like, a 12 million farm rate. So I mean, that's kind of the way I was doing the math when I was 14. I was like, I wait, look at this. And then the other
checks
thing
out.
is that there's a bunch of other things that factored in. So I was playing against a bunch of players that were local, kind of average local players. And so I just start trouncing everybody. There comes a day when I just start beating everybody. And so I am winning all the time. I'm getting better and better and better. And everybody in town's looking at me. And this is, pre-internet, where, if you see a 16-year-old that's, running 100 balls in straight pool and winning tournaments and stuff, it's like, wow, this kid's going to be something. So I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Everybody else is nodding along. And I'm like, I'm going to be great. And they're all like, yeah, this kid's amazing. And I'm winning all the time. And so that was why I was able to believe that. So I truly believed I could be a great player. And then on top of that, I also had a story that was kind of delusional. But I believed this as a kid, that like once I got there, like it was going to solve every problem I had in my life. Like once I became this great pool player, like there was just going to be this huge payoff of like, I didn't even know. It was just kind of like in a romantic comedy where the whole movie is like the two people meeting and then having the little fallouts and then patch it up and then they finally, fall in love. And then it's like the assumption is they're going to live happily ever after, which for anybody that's been married, you understand that, there's a reason why they cut the movie off right where they do, because, let's just pretend that it's happily ever after from that point. And
Yeah.
so the point is that I didn't know what was going to happen when I became a great player, but I was sure that it was going to be some Disney fairy tale ending. So I believed I could hit the goal, and I believed it was going to have the greatest payoff possible. So I had single minded, like, yeah, 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 I can get there. It's going to be awesome. And I think you probably had that same mindset. And so what the problem is for us is that what changed was, once we started playing the top players in the world, at some point you get old enough. First of all, you start playing players where you don't just win all the time and you beat everybody and everybody tells you how great you are. You show up at the US Open, and it's, instead of having this, everybody in town telling you how great you are, you have a bunch of guys from China that don't speak your language that just run out on you, and you're like, okay, what is going on? And everything that like you made you so special, everybody else can do that better than you can anyway. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, that's how it is. And so that's the first part, is all of a sudden it's hard, it's not as believable anymore.
Hmm.
And then in terms of what the payout is, then you get a little older and you start looking at that, you start hanging out and rooming with the guys that are like doing this stuff, and they're like, oh man, I should have like laid tile, man. This is garbage. And you're like, oh man. So then anyway, the point is you start to see all of a sudden you see how tough the road is and you see how little the payoff is, and then you see how difficult it is. And it's kind of like for both of us, we've both gone through our own little like come to Jesus moment, like wake up moment of truth where it's like, yeah, this is not the deal I thought I was getting. And
Yeah.
some people, a few people, continue to go down that road, but there's a reason why, like, of all the young, hungry pool players that want to be great that set out on that road, there's a reason that, like, more than 99% of them, or if not 99.99, like, everybody turns back. Everybody turns back at some point because they kind of see what the reality is of their chances, how difficult it is, how little the payoff is, how difficult the road is, and what their limitations are. And at some point, um, almost everybody turns back at some point. And so first of all, do you kind of agree with that? Like that
Yeah,
for the,
for sure.
so then the reason that we're a little different is because then we are in a tough spot where the goals that we had when we were kids no longer work for us. And so going back to that equation, we're in a spot where whatever goal you set for yourself is going to be less than being the greatest player in the world or one of the greats. And so it's never going to be as exciting to you as your original goal that you really wanted.
Right.
On the other hand, the amount that you can put in right now as a part-time player is not nearly what you were willing to put in. So you've got less you can put in. The goal is less exciting, and then it's like, I don't know. It's somehow it's like it's really hard for people that were kind of like wanting to go all the way to backpedal and then find a meaningful second half of their career, knowing that it's not going to be what they originally told themselves or wanted. It's
Yeah.
and so we've both struggled with that. And so why did I get kind of on this is because we were talking about that formula, and we were talking about how challenging it is to find goal, basically how challenging it is to find goals that are meaningful and achievable, because most of the goals at this point in our lives that are meaningful aren't achievable, and most of the goals that are achievable don't look that inspiring, and it's a really tricky one. And so what I would say, thank you for saying it was clip worthy or worth listening to again. I really do think so. I think that, like, when you're young, or when you're first, I shouldn't say when you're young, but when you're starting out the game, it's really easy when you see a lot of steady improvement really quickly, because you're improving so quickly that just encourages you and rewards you all the time. Um, but little by little, I think you have to learn to manage your motivation. You have to learn to be thoughtful about your goals and your stories, and you kind of have to learn to, like, as these emotions, like I said, they don't just come out of nowhere. They are they are kind of a culmination and a manifestation of your own self-talk and your own goals and things like that. So it's learning about it and being thoughtful about it, I think, is useful. So yeah, I got
Yeah. And it is kind of weird too because so the people who make it to the very top of the game, it's just like they just never hit their breaking point, right? With it, like to turn back. Well, what's interesting is I mean, you probably could find a couple of players, but for the most part, once like players get to that top, right? And then when they start to fall off, like when their peak kind of or their hot few years kind of like dies off, it's really difficult for them to bounce back from that. Like we've talked about this too. Like what is like FSR, right? Like he had like a couple really good years, and then it seemed like he just couldn't like find his way back to a final like for a while. But and that's a little bit of an extreme example. I mean, he's still a great player, but you think about guys who were like the top guys 10 years ago, right? And it's like, do they realistically have a chance to ever win a major again? Like probably not, you know? I mean, I'm
And I
talking
think
like
a lot of, they say it's hard to get to the top and it's harder to stay there. I think a lot of the reason for that is because that the inspiration that you need from a goal versus, so what happens is, and what you think it's going to do for you. So if you have a mindset that once I get to the top, it's going to be the greatest thing in the world, great, great, great. And then when you get there, then they start having the expect. First of all, there's kind of like this disappointment, this letdown. Like, this is it. Like, this is all I get is, like, they give me a check for one tournament. I get my picture taken, and now what? Like, that's it. And now I gotta do it again and again and again. So their expectation grows. They didn't really get the payoff that they promised themselves deep in their heart that they were going to get. And so they have some kind of disillusionment. Sometimes there's some resentment, some kind of like, so now they're like, now they're a little disappointed. And then they're playing other people that still believe that if I can just beat FSR, I'll be the greatest thing ever. And FSR is up there like, man, there's nothing waiting for you. And I know that. And now I'm supposed to be as hungry as this guy who doesn't know that yet. It's it's a really, really tough spot.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think hang on one second. And one thing you'd said earlier is that along our journey, there's going to be an acceptance. I think you were saying that you have to accept at some point that there's going to be loss, there's going to be heartache, that there's going to be adversity. And I think that what one of the things I mentioned is on our career path, how when you're playing local players where you could get to the level, it's like if you're playing in the local leagues, you can always find a level that you can dominate. If you play recreational leagues and then you get very serious about pool, you can get to where you're winning all the time. And then you start thinking that's just the way it should be forever. But then when you start playing bigger and bigger events, there's when you find the right pond for yourself, there's going to be a pond where you're not just going to be trouncing your buddies all the time. You're going to have some hard breaks. And so those stories you have to tell yourself have to change to reflect the reality. And if the stories you've been telling yourself are, if I do it right, I should just go beat everybody and win and be great, that's not really going to match the reality of what happens when you're playing against in your own weight division. And so little by little, those goals go from being, I'm going to be the greatest ever and win all the time. And they start becoming things like, I'm gonna be my best version of myself. I'm gonna get my share. I'm gonna get four kings at some point, things like that.
Yeah.
Is that what you meant kind of when you were talking
It
about
is.
like
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
accepting a little bit more accepting of some
yep.
defeats and
But I would say it, like the tricky part is it's hard to prepare yourself for that because there's such a small amount of people who go through the feeling of like, building up that confidence by like dominating their local area or their regional area that like who's going to be there to warn you aside from like or help you like prep for that aside from like another player who's already done that. So it's kind of a weird like I guess it's kind of the catch 22 of it, right? You get the
yeah,
benefit of dominating and gaining that confidence, but
and then it gets taken away.
yeah, it gets taken away,
but
yeah. And
but
once
so
it's
then
there,
so then you
like
could say what good is the warning then from us? And I would say, or what good is it to be warned? And I would
yeah,
say that the value of it is that when you start playing in your own weight division, you start moving up levels. If level one is these guys can beat me now, and then I'm going to practice up, and in a few months I start beating them all the time, and then level two is a little bit better players, and maybe they're beating me now, but then I practice up, in a year I beat them all the time. That's a cool story, bro. But there's going to be levels you reach where you level up and they're beating you up a lot, and then you get better, and then they still beat you up a lot, and then once in a while you win. And that's like if so that's kind of how it changes when you start leveling up. You just there's levels you reach where you just don't get to win all the time. And so the
right,
warning, what good is the warning? I would say the warning is good so that when that starts happening, you don't get pissed off and frustrated at what's wrong with you that you can't figure out how to win all the time. You just have to understand that's the landscape. Shane doesn't win all the time. Federer doesn't win all the time. Filler doesn't win all the time. Jason Shaw doesn't win all the time. The reason I just had to name all these different names is because none of them win all the time. And, they all take turns. I mean, who won, who was it? Just won the last one in Vietnam? Was it Johan Chua? Was that who won?
yeah. Which is
Yeah.
like
Like
or
how many
whatever.
losses has he had? Or no, was it Ko Ping Yi?
No, Cole got second.
Okay. Yeah. So the point is like, when was the last time Johan Chua won a major? Like all
I
he's
don't
been
know if he
doing
ever
is
has. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
he's just been losing and losing and losing and losing and losing and losing. But he knew that someday he'd get a king, and now it's his day. He's king. But but like, yeah, man, if he had quit pool 5 years ago because he's just not winning all the time, he never would have won. So
No, he'd
at
be
some
doing a
point,
podcast at like 10 p.m.
what's that?
I said he'd be doing a podcast at like 10 p.m.
So the point is that it was a critical. So when you look at what did it take for him to win, one of the things it took for him to win was to adjust his expectations to build in a lot of losses along the way and a lot of setbacks and really understand that landscape.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to go too much deeper, but I was just gonna say I think that like the other component to that is not only do they have to like be okay with that landscape, they also have to like probably not like put too much weight on the sacrifices, that they might be making on the back end, or like the what ifs, like would I rather have this instead? I mean, you just have to be so all into it. You can't have any thoughts of like, well, maybe I should be doing this instead and having a family or working this job. Like it's like that doesn't exist in their mind. So then
So
that's the
yeah,
only way you can really cope with dealing with the ups and downs at that point.
I should also mention I haven't been I plug my mental games. I do a mental game training as well. So anybody that's still listening, check it out on my website, mnpoolbootcamp.com. Three person interactive, small group. It's pretty cool. I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was what I was put here on earth to do, is to help people in this way. And that there was value in it. So anyway, check it out. But I would say when I always think about my mental game approach, I always think of it as a reality based approach, which is the better that you understand reality, the more effective you're going to be. And so that means the better you understand yourself, the better you understand your own desires, the better you understand your budget of input for time and energy, the better you understand your competition and what the road ahead looks like then you can set up a winning equation, which is meaningful and achievable. And then at some point, it doesn't have to feel like you're just hoping that someday you're not a loser and that something good happens. Instead, you can actually have an understanding of the landscape, what you're prepared to put in, what's meaningful to you, how to go about setting up a plan to where you will get that, and then not having pressure on you, because whether it's going to happen today or in the future, that at some point you will have that plan come together and you will have what you want out of that. Like when you set it up right, it doesn't have to be something you're trying to do. It could be something that you will do, like when people go to college to get a 4 year degree, like in psychology to be a therapist, like they don't go like, I don't know, man, I don't know if this will ever work. It's like, no, there's a certain amount of credits you need. It'll take this much time. It costs this much money. Here's the things you have to learn. It's a
Yeah.
formula. You just do it and you can achieve that result. And for some reason with pool, people treat it differently, where they're like, I don't know if I can do it or not. And it's like some people have it and some people are winners and some people aren't. And it's like, no, 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 it's not mystical, man. And so all the things you're saying about understanding how competition levels change and how your results will change, understanding how your own stories will change as you grow and as you gain experiences, and how you'll go from being, motivated by delusion to looking at reality and having to find realistic ways to motivate yourself, and all these different things. It's all about better and better understanding what reality is, working within that, and then finding ways to optimize it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Easier said than done at times, but definitely the right approach.
But even that, the exciting part is, Jesse, and here's my inspiration for you, because I'm a little bit older than you, so I get to put on my father time cap here. Young pup, here's the deal. You could look at this as like, oh, this is a huge burden. Back when I was young and I just was going to be the best in the world, I didn't have to deal with any of this crap, and I could just go out and play and be hungry all the time, and everything good was happening. And what I would say to that is, A, the everything good was happening part is kind of not true, because again, that was when you were on the local scene playing where you could, outside of your own weight division where you could win all the time. But B, I would say that that maybe you could look at this as a good thing, which is, you know, if the story you told yourself was I had pool figured out when I was 18, and it just didn't really get me where I wanted to be, I would say, what if everything we've been talking about is part of pool? That actually, instead of thinking like I already figured out how to play pool at 18 and now I just don't know that I could do much with it, I'd say, what if everything we're talking about is pool as well? And you learn a lot about the game, almost like a guy that, breaks really good, has a lot of firepower, runs out good, but doesn't move very well and doesn't kick very well. And, he's all of a sudden he goes to the pros and he's just not getting enough opportunities to really win. He'd be like, well, I don't understand. But it's like, no, 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 this is part of the game too. You got to learn how to move with these guys. And then you can get there. I'd say, what if all the stuff we're talking about is part of like the mental moving game that you can work on, and that is not a chore that you have to do that's stopping you from having the pool game you want and the career you want. I'd say maybe this is actually exciting, that there's still more to learn about pool, and that the road's not over. Instead of thinking the road's over I'd be like, no, no, no. This the fact that we're still talking about it is proof that there's things that you can work on, and maybe it's not going and drilling on your table, but maybe journaling about some of the stuff and having these conversations, and really maybe there are some answers here about finding ways to find meaning, drive, and in a realistic and effective way. And that maybe that means that there's actually some things you can learn and more road ahead. That's
Yeah.
my inspiration for the day.
Okay. No, it's good. It is. It's good. I mean, it's good stuff.
All right, man. Well, that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I got anything else for that topic.
Yeah,
I
got a
don't
little
know. What do you got?
I got nothing, man. You know that,
Nothing?
but it's good to catch up with you, man. It's good to catch up, and I do I do think that let's and just humor me. What's outside of a performance based, just what's a fun pool memory from the road that has nothing to do with like a pool match, but like just something that was wouldn't have been in your life had you not chosen the life of going to tournaments and playing pool.
So, but it's not related to pool, you're saying?
Well, I mean, I just don't want it to be like a big win or a check or something like that, but just
Yeah, no, just like a
nothing really
funny
result
moment. I don't
oriented.
know. I'm just I mean, I think I talked about this before, but it's the this one always sticks in my head. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Um, that we were in LA, or not, was it LA? It was the hard times, that not the Sacramento one, I think. Yeah, the one in Bellflower.
Is it a Mountain View or is this the one that the Seminole event? No.
It wasn't a Seminole event.
Okay.
This was they just had like a hard times tournament at the time,
Okay.
anyways. And I was like on the road with Mike Deshane at the time, and I don't know, like he was hitting the balls pretty good, but somehow like we were all like kind of standing around the 6 by 12, snooker table, but it was set up like a golf table. And you know the story or no? So
No.
okay, so those tables are like ultra tight. I mean, so like the snooker pockets, they're rounded, right? Well, the shelf of the pocket, like you have to get past all the rounded part. Like it's already going back the other way to get it to sink in, you know? So it's like ultra tight. And for some reason, like Scott Frost was like messing around with the balls on there, and he was like trying to make shots, and Mike Deshane like walked up and made some comment, and he's like, well, you can't make a ball on here either, he was like making fun of his stroke or something. So they set up this shot where he uh he put the cue ball in the jaws of the one corner
This
pocket.
sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm dying to hear it again.
Yeah,
I can't
and
remember.
then they
So
what
like
they did,
diagonally from the middle of the table, from the
yep, to
jaws,
the
the
other
cue
corner
ball in the
pocket.
jaws, and the object
And
ball
the
in the middle.
object ball is in the center of the table, right? And he allows him to line it up, and he's like, it was like they might have bet like $50. It was something like really small, but he was like, I'll give you 10 tries at it. And like, so he gets it down, and I think he shoots I don't know if he shot the first one, or if he was like, hey, I don't think that that's straight on, like however it worked, but he got down. It was either the first or second shot, and he hit this ball so good that the ball, like the object ball, like fired in. It like did, and then it falls in, and the cue ball slow roll followed the object ball all the way to the corner. He hit the ball so pure, and everybody just kind of looked around in awe, like how did that just happen? And then Scott just kind of like his face turned red, and he just kind of like reached in his pocket, peeled
So did
off the
that count as
money.
a did that count as a loss because he scratched?
No, no, no. Like they were just like, it was
Oh,
just the
so
best.
Deshane was the one that hit the shot.
Shane hit the
Oh,
shot. Yeah.
okay, okay. I'm sorry,
So
I
yeah, it
misunderstood.
was just he said he'd give him 10 shots to try to make the ball. That was
And
all
he
it
made
was.
it. He just popped it. He just laid it
He
right
he
in
hit
and
it
followed
so,
it.
I mean, it was unbelievable, man. Like I literally don't think, man, if you went there, if that table was set up the same way, I like you could have 50 shots, and I don't know if you would make it in there. You have to hit the ball because you have to hit it so hard to get it through the jaws at that angle. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like it's not like there's like a huge opening. I mean, it's a golf table, so the ball is so tight. There's probably a credit card width outside of
So
the
so
ball.
for people that can't imagine, you picture, for like how any shot that was an open shot could be that tough. Think about like if you had like a 5 ball combination where you had a ball a foot from the pocket, a ball a foot from that ball, and then a ball a foot from that ball, and you just went back like 5 or 6 or 7 balls, and you had like some 7 ball combination where it's like, yeah, in theory you could strike it straight, but it's like it's just it's
So
really,
hard to do,
really
yeah.
like there's the margin of error is down to like a 60th of a tip of inadvertent spin or just nothing. There's no.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, the on top of that, like those snooker balls are smaller, and then you're using a regular size tip, and I don't know, it's just, I mean, it happened, so it happened, but it was just one of those moments where you're like, I don't know, it was you just had to be there, kind of, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if I have any other
I have a
great
fun
stories
memory
for it.
that's kind of has to do with tinkering, kind of like just to end on our idea of tinkering is when we were at that tournament a few years ago in oh the one by outside of Baltimore, outside of by Shenandoah National Forest. Anyway, the bottom line is there was one table that wasn't in use for the tournament, and they had the brackets. They had this big like kind of like what do you call that paper where you like when they have those big cutout checks, the fake checks that they're going to hand somebody like the corrugated paper, like almost like cardboard or something, like a big piece of cardboard. Anyway, they had some big piece of paper that was like cardboard or something where they had the brackets, like a poster with the brackets on them, and it was sitting on the edge of the pool table so that it was like propped up on the bottom of the brackets were in the middle of the pool table, and then it was leaned up against the rail so that it had a little incline and they were writing the names of who advanced. So basically it made like a ramp on the pool table. And I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
remember, were you the one that started this? Where you started shooting balls, or somebody started shooting balls where they pulled balls out of the pocket on that table. They started shooting balls up the brackets. So it would like go up the ramp and then like curve around and plop down back on the table. And they
Yeah, no,
started,
it was Rodney that was doing it. Rodney, he was doing like the finger pull thing. He was like you snap and like you gotta throw the
yeah,
cube
yeah.
3 rails, and he was just kind of messing around with it. He's like 3 rails, and then
That's right. He was like throwing the ball up the ramp and trying to get it to like arc around and like play some multiple rails, or he was going like 2 rails up the ramp and then down at some ball in the other corner. I think that's what the shot was. Multiple rails up the ramp after that. So anyway, then all of a sudden, of course, Alex Pagulayan perks up and he comes over and he starts goofing around, and of course you're up there because this is like Tinkerer specials. Like, oh, we've got a ramp on the table. What can you do with this? And next thing you know, there was a bunch of us. We'd all thrown like 20 bucks in a pot, and we were all taking turns shooting some stupid shot that involves going up and down this ramp, trying to complete some gaffy shot. And I don't even know if anyone ever made it or if our matches got called and we had to abort. But that
yeah,
was
we
just
all
like
had
a
to get our 20 back. It was a super difficult, like it was like you had to have the perfect momentum, and the angle just didn't quite make sense. So like
yeah, yeah.
it was pretty tough, but
Yeah, nobody had it figured out. Like we were all trying different strategies to make it work, and I don't even
yeah.
know. Yeah. So anyway, just you got to remember, guys, it's a game. Have fun, tinker, experiment, try stuff. Put a ramp on your table sometimes. Just remember, it's a fun game.
Put a ramp on the table.
Hey man, I'll play you some ramp over 40 a rattle. All right, Jesse, let's get out of here.
All right. Yep. We'll see ya.
Bye.